Hello, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic. Now, after yesterday's mammoth video on Christoph Seeliger's extraordinary odd-even killer Sudoku, which is one of the longest videos we've ever published, we're going to take a look at this puzzle today, which I hope will be a shorter solve, but hopefully no less interesting. I'm a member of a Facebook group that features puzzles from time to time by some of the world's best puzzle authors, including Christoph actually. And this puzzle was published about a week ago by Swaroop Guggilam, the Indian solver and setter, and it's got some very good praise on the Facebook group. So I'm hoping that it'll be interesting for us to solve. Now, let's just remind ourselves of the rules of this puzzle. It's called, as I say, the Little Killer Sudoku, and there are no digits in the grid at all, and you just get these clues outside the grid. And along the arrows, so let's look at this 28 clue. What that's telling us is that those 5 cells along the arrow have to sum up to 28. Now, unlike Killer Sudoku, it's quite permissible for the numbers to repeat along this yellow line. They can't repeat within the same box, so these 2 yellow squares could not be the same number, but these squares could be the same number, and even those squares could all be the same number. Now, apparently it's possible to use just these clues to finish the puzzle, so I'm hoping that we will be able to do that. Now, I think Swaroop created this puzzle as a practice puzzle for the World Sudoku Championship for the Indian team, so it should be, you know, of that standard of difficulty, and for that reason it might be great to solve. Now, if you want to try the puzzle, as usual, just click on the link under the video. It'll take you to our web page where you should be able to play interactively on whatever device is your preference. Now, with that, I'm going to try and solve it. So the obvious place to start, I think, is the corners, look, because we've actually got arrows pointing at the corner squares, so we're going to be able to, there's a few given digits we're going to get, and we've got a 14 clue there, and we can't use a 5, so 14 in 2 squares without using a 5, well, that must be a 6 and an 8. 12, 12, 6. Now, okay, so I don't think the second clue's in the other positions are going to be useful. Let's try this 17, given that's, we can't use 5, 6 and 8. So, right, so there must be a 9 along that one of these 3 cells, otherwise we couldn't get to 17 using the remaining numbers. And therefore the other 2 numbers are going to have to add up to 8 without using 3, 5, without using 2, 6. So that must in fact be 179. I guess that means those squares there must be 2, 3 and 4 just to complete the block. Always worth remembering in any sort of Sudoku that involves sums that a 3 by 3 block adds to 45. So we've got a 30 clue there. An 11 clue. No, okay, so I was about to think this 11 clue was going to be helpful, but because we can repeat digits along the yellow squares here, it's perfectly possible for this to contain, well, I suppose it could contain 3 1s or something like that, in which case there'd be quite a lot of latitude for the other 2 cells. So that's probably not where we need to look next. Uh, 15 there and a 12, so 12 plus 15 is 20. 27 plus 2 is 29. Those 3 cells have to sum up to 16. That's not a useful total. Let's try over here. 12 and this might be better, because 12 and 19, that's obviously 31. Plus 8 is 39. Those 3 cells have to sum up to 6, and as they're in the same box, they must be 1, 2 and 3. That's the only way we can do that. So now, as we've used a 3 in those 3 cells, how do we make this 12 sum work? It can't be 4, 8, it can't be 3, 9, it must be 5 and 7. So those squares must be 4, 6 and 9. And, well, I can't resolve the 6, but I can see that if I add 13, 6 and 3 together, I get 22. Now that means that these three cells, because I know that the total box adds to 45, these three cells have got to sum up to 23. So they must be 6, 8 and 9. That's the only way that will work. So there must be a 7 in one of those squares now, because we can't have a 7 obviously in the 6 sum. Right, what am I meant to do next? 19. That's 20 maybe. That's still quite a lot of latitude in those two squares. 15. 28 here. Oops. Okay, this is interesting. I'm not spotting what I need to do. Ah, no, hang on, there is something. Right, so we worked out those three squares have got to add up to 16. So just a reminder, we looked at this box, we know it adds to 45. We've got 2 plus 12 plus 15. So that's 29. Those three add up to 16. But look, we've got an 11 and a 17 that totally includes these yellow squares. So these squares along the 11 and the 17 add to 28. But I know that these three in this box are 16. So 28 less 16 is 12. So these 6 cells have to add up to 12. And they're both, look, 3 of them are in the same box in 2 different places. So the only way we can do that, a bit like over here, is if these are the numbers 1, 2 and 3. That is really beautiful. Now, this 2 is lovely now, isn't it? Because that's going to mean that that square's a 2 and that square's a 2. That means that's not a 2. And are we starting? That's not a 2. 2, 3. I wonder if we can do a similar trick actually. Let's just look at these squares, because 28 and 20 are obviously very big totals, and we're going to be able to deduct a very small total from that. So 28 plus 20 is 48, less 6 is 42. So these squares have got to add up to 42, and this one is a small number. So if this is a 1, how do we make 5 squares add to 41? This maximum this could be would be 17. And these 3 would then have to be 24. But if this is a 3, there's a lot more latitude. So how do I resolve that square? This is a very, very nice puzzle, actually. Already, it's normally little killers. I do enjoy them, but they don't contain, you sort of go through the combinations and you can eke out a solution in the same way a lot of times. But this one, let's try and just check these sums. And that one. So this is 48. 48 less 23. So 20. That's no use at all. 25 for those 6 cells without any restriction on what the numbers can be. No, don't like that. Let's check this one. So this is 9 less 43, so it's 34. Again, that's less useful than this. So this does seem to be the most restricted position. Right. Oh, hang on. Oh, that's very clever. Okay, we need to use this 30 clue. So, look at that. That is very clever. So the yellow squares add up to 30. These other squares in these two 3x3 blocks add up to 12. So 30 plus 12 is 42. And that caters for all those squares. Now I know that this 3x3 block and this 3x3 block together have got to add up to 90, because 2 lots of 45. So those 6 cells must add up to 48. How can we do that if there are 3 of, again, we've got the restriction that these 3 have to be different numbers and these 3 have to be different numbers. Well, they've got to be 24. So this is 789 and this is 789. Oh, that's really lovely. Absolutely brilliant. So now we now know this must be 4, 5 and 6 twice along these diagonals. 4, 5 and 6 of course being 15. And now this one, because this one can't be an 8 or a 9, this can't be a 1. Sorry, that one can't be a 1, that needs to be a 3. So that's a 3, that's a 1, and these cells have to sum up to 39. And the maximum I could make these two cells would be 15. Oh, that's perfect. So that's right, because that will give 24 here. So this is a 6, this is a 9, and this, these squares here are 7, 8, and 9 as well, and there's an 8 there. So that's 8, and this is a 7, 9 pair. That means this one is 5, that's 7. This one can't be 9, look, and there's a 9 there, so that one can't be 9. So that's a 9. Can't have a 6 in either of those two squares, and there's a 5 here, so that means that's 4, that's 5. That fixes the 4 and the 6. That's a stunning start to this puzzle. Just really, really beautiful. Now these two must be 4 and 5. Now this 12 then, this square here is going to have to be 7 or 8 to make the 12 work. This one can't be a 7 anymore. 6 and 8 both point at that square, so that's a 9. Seven, that must be a 7, look. It's not a 7, therefore. That's not a 9. There's a 1, 3 pair here, so that one is a 7. 1, 3, 6, 8, 6. 1, 3, 7, 8. I feel like I can do more here using maybe this 11 is a bit more restricted now, because we've now got 2, 2 and 3, so that's 7, so these two squares have got to add up to 4, and if that one can only be a 1 or a 3, this one can only be a 1 or a 3 as well, and that gives a 1, 2, 3 triple in this row. So these two squares must be 6 and 9. 3. And down here, what do we need? 1, 3, 7 and 8, is that what we're left with? I think it is. 3, 7, 8. We've got the 15 here, so 6. That's interesting. In order to make this 15 work, this can never be 6, because If it is 6, these two squares have got to sum up to 9, and they can't. So in fact that is a 9, that's a 6, therefore that's an 8, that's a 6. Therefore that's a 6. The 5 then fixes the 5-4 pair. That must be an 8. So now these two squares have got to sum up to 6, and that means they must be 1 and 5. That's the only way that will work. That means 3 and 7 like that. That means this is a 3. Isn't it extraordinary how this puzzle sort of has unwound once we found that beautiful logic at the start? That must be a 7 now. This must be a 1. 3 here. Okay, so there we go. We get to this position, and now presumably we can use the diagonal totals to disambiguate these pairs. So we've got 9 here, so these two squares have got to sum up to 11, therefore that one must be a 2, that must be a 9, that's a 7. Now we can get this one, that must be a 1. So we've done that one. Does that look like it's adding up to the right number? Yes. This 20 might be helpful because we've got 4 and 3, so these two squares have got to sum up to 13. So that one must be a 4, that must be a 9, that must be a 2. 6 resolves the 6 and the 8 over on this side. And then let's try and use the 23 now. So we've already got 10, so these two squares have got to sum up to 13. And we can't use 5, 8, because there can't be a 5 or an 8 here. And we can't use 4, 9, so these two squares are 6 and 7, and that's resolvable. That must be a 3 by basic Sudoku. Those 3's interacting, look. 1, 2, 5 into those 3 squares. I suspect I'm missing. Look, we can put 2, 4 and 5 into those squares as well. Let's do that, because that means those squares have got to be 1, 3 and 6, which forces a 6 up there, a 1 there and a 3 there. So this is not a 1 now. 1. And you can see now there's the two 6 pairs. These two have to add up to 6. This can't be a 5 anymore. So this must be a 4 or a 5 in this position. In fact, there's a 5 there. So that's 5, 2 and 1 like that. That looks like it's working. That should be a 2 unless I've made a mistake. And that should be a 1. Move some of the digits here, so 4, 5 and 2 get taken out. These 3 squares must be 4, 5 and 8. I don't think we can resolve those yet. I don't know, have we actually used all of the sums? No, look, I haven't used this one. Silly me. So we've got 10 plus 12, that's 22. So those two squares have got to sum up to 6 to give 28. Well, the only way that can work is if that's a 2. And that's a 4. So that's a 4 and that's a 5. There is not a 4 in either of those, and that resolves the 5 and the 8. These 3 squares now must be 3, 4 and 6. So again I think we get the order. That must be like that. These 2 squares must be 1 and 7. Again, we're going to get the order. That resolves the 7 and the 8 at the bottom. There's be an 8 in one of those 2 squares, and 5 as well, I think. So 5 and 8, 8 and 9, 9 and hopefully a 2 there. Check. Yes. Beautiful puzzle. Beautiful puzzle. Yeah, kudos Swaroop for making that. That really was lovely. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Give us a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. We keep trying to improve our ratings on the algorithm. And I tell you what, that is a puzzle that we have not cracked yet. and we'll be back soon for another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.